Hans Cooper. I can't remember when he was around, but people say that he was like a pioneer of like using clay in a sculptural medium. So whereas at the time most people were using clay to create pottery, he was using the wheel as a tool to create sculpture, but within the vessel form. And he was working alongside Lucy Reed. I think he was like her apprentice at the time. So his pieces are quite ahead of the time. See Ree's work. She mainly was a studio potter, and she was working with Hans Cooper, and I think they probably shared some kind of inspiration between each other, because they're throwing these very delicate forms, and in some ways they're quite loose and quite, simple. They don't seem to use too much colour to, obliterate the form. It's very much about the shapes. But she used a lot of kind of matte glazes, and like even these yellows are slightly matte in colour. But yeah, so that's Lucy Reed. Sadly, she's passed away, but she was focusing on making functional tableware and like table sets. And I remember when I was studying on my MA, I had the opportunity to do some work experience with her, and at the time she was looking into new technologies to create tableware. So she was using like a ram press, which is a machine that presses clay into a plaster mold to create the shapes. So she was kind of experimenting with different processes when I was studying, and I was quite lucky to see her do that, and to have some throwing lessons with her. She was a very nice lady, and she created some really kind of very detailed work with lots of pattern. I think that was her kind of style. So that's kind of one example of her work. Philip Eglin, and I think he mainly focuses on figurative work, and it's clay, but I think he uses a lot of terracotta, but I could be wrong. He might use other materials, and I think some people say that some of his figures have like a political statement to it, or like this one, there's some kind of like religious iconography on there. I don't understand the full story, but it's quite interesting seeing his work. There's a lot of kind of expressive kind of marks in there, and they seem to come alive. This is done by Magdalene Odondo, and she mostly makes vessel forms, and she usually burnishes the surface. So that's a process where you're polishing the surface of clay, leather hard clay, with a spoon to make it really shiny. And she focuses on that a lot, on that process within her work, and it all kind of originates from her, I think, her African heritage in terms of the shapes where they come from. But I was pretty lucky to meet her as well when I was studying. But she's got a massive attention to detail, and you can just see that in her work. I mean, they're so perfect in shape. I mean, she hand builds them, but the forms are just so perfect. You can hardly see any trace of the hand. So her work is pretty amazing. Yeah, very fine, very precise. Richard Slee. When was he around? From the I think it was created in the 1990, this piece, but he's quite interesting because he was looking at clay again from a kind of artistic, kind of sculptural perspective, and I think that's the thing. Most people generally think that people working with clay are potters, making functional pieces, but obviously you got people who are using clay from a different approach. They're using it in a way to create something that's an artwork in itself. So I really like these pieces because they're really surreal. They just look almost like natural, like they're from nature or something. But there's something very curious about it because it's nothing recognizable. You're left to, put your own imagination into the work. This one's by Walter Keeler. He does a lot of functional wear. I think he uses a lot of terracotta, but I could be wrong. But I mean, I think a lot of his work is mostly functional, but there is a kind of sculptural element to it as well, because like this piece is a kind of stand, and although you could put something inside, it almost looks kind of sculptural at the same time. So, but his works are always very, very precise as well, and uses lots of kind of layers of colour. And I think that's another piece of his. Oh, yeah, it looks like it is. But that's salt glaze. Yeah, I think that's salt glaze. So that's like been fired in a kiln. I don't know, maybe like a wood-fired kiln or gas kiln, and then you throw in salt, and you get these kind of colour effects on the surface. I think. This is by Elizabeth Fridge, and again she was using the vessel, as a kind of canvas to break up as a canvas to create forms with, but then she was using colour and pattern to break up the form, and I think almost trying to create an illusion, because when you look at it at the front you think they're very three-dimensional, but then when you look at it on the side they're quite flat, almost quite flat. So I think she was playing with the illusion of space and form, so how people see the form and the colour. And again, her works are extremely precise in the design and the pattern. Really good kind of craftsmanship to the work, I think. Sophie Woodrow, and she creates these very kind of dreamlike figures, and in some sense they're quite mystical. I mean, they look, some of them look like people, some of them look like animals. They're very surreal, but I think, and she uses, I don't know what clay she uses with it. I think she works mostly in porcelain. It's a very fine white material, and usually she doesn't usually use a lot of colour, so it's usually just very white, remaining the clay body with a simple clay glaze on top, I guess. This is from an artist called Michael Flynn. Myself and my wife had the opportunity to meet him in Germany, where we did a residency and symposium. Sorry, it's not a residency, and he works a lot with figures as well. But his figures are there's a lot of movement in his figures, and I think they're all hand built, like Claire's work. But again, there's a lot of movement in his work, and I'm not too sure where his inspiration comes from. Maybe it's I can't remember, but again, they're very surreal and just very kind of joyful pieces, and it probably reflects his characters as well, because his character is also very kind of joyful and upbeat. So yeah, that's his work.